Hello guys, welcome to my channel where stories filled with revenge, moral lessons, and love are told. Make sure you like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you won't miss the next story. Adrian Cross swept into my life like a warm gust of wind that carried promises I thought would never fade. He was young, but already carving out a name for himself in the business world, his sharp suits and sharper mind making him impossible to ignore. I was 23, just starting my career in a small marketing firm in Melbourne, and the night we met at a corporate networking event still feels like a scene from a film. He had that magnetic confidence, the kind that made you feel like the only person in the room when he spoke to you. At first, I was cautious. I'd seen men like him before, ambitious, charming, the kind who chased excitement until it no longer entertained them. But Adrian was different, or so I thought. He'd call me every night, asking about my day, remembering the smallest details of our conversations. He sent flowers to my office just because, whisked me away to hidden cafes, and once took me on a surprise weekend trip to Sydney just to watch the sunrise over Bondi Beach. Our romance felt intoxicating, like a perfect storm of passion and trust. He told me he loved me first, and I believed him with every part of my being. So when I found out I was pregnant, fear wasn't my first reaction, hope was. I imagined us raising a child together, building a life filled with the same warmth we'd shared. I thought he'd be thrilled. I still remember that rainy Thursday evening when I told him. We were in his apartment, the city lights glowing through the floor-to-ceiling windows. My hands trembled as I held his, smiling nervously. "Adrian, I'm pregnant." The silence that followed felt heavy enough to crush me. His expression shifted confusion, then something cold and distant. He pulled his hands away. This can't happen right now, Emily. You know my career is just taking off. I'm not ready for this." I tried to reassure him, to tell him we'd figure it out together, but his face hardened. "I can't do this," he said flatly. "You'll have to handle it. Without me." I thought he was just scared, that he'd call me the next day to apologize. But instead, I received a short message, "Don't contact me again." His number stopped working after that. The days that followed blurred into one another. I felt abandoned in every sense of the word by the man I loved, by the dream I'd built in my heart. But giving up my baby was never an option. I decided that if Adrian didn't want to be part of our lives, then I would make sure our child never had to need him. I moved out of the city to a small, quiet suburb near Geelong, where no one knew me as Adrian Cross's girlfriend. I took on extra shifts, working long hours even when my feet ached and my back burned. I learned to budget down to the last cent, cutting corners where I could, but never compromising on what mattered. When my daughter, Lila Hart, was born, I held her tiny body against my chest and promised her that she would never feel unwanted. Raising her alone was not easy. Some nights I cried in silence, terrified I wouldn't be able to give her the life she deserved. But Lila was a gift, bright-eyed, curious, and resilient from the start. She grew up watching me juggle jobs, pay bills, and still make time to help with school projects or read bedtime stories. Every birthday, every milestone, I was reminded of what Adrian had walked away from. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I would wonder if he ever thought about us, if he ever pictured the daughter he'd never met. I knew he was out there, making headlines with his expanding company, shaking hands with world leaders, and gracing the covers of business magazines. But to me, he was just a ghost from another life. Years passed, and Lila became everything I had ever hoped for. Brilliant in school, fiercely independent, and full of dreams that were entirely her own. She had my determination and, to my dismay, Adrian's sharp mind for business. By 17, she had already started a small online venture designing eco-friendly accessories, and within a year, she was earning enough to pay for her own laptop and contribute to her future tuition. I never told her the truth about her father. As far as she knew, he was a man who hadn't been ready for a family. I kept his name out of our conversations, not wanting to taint her achievements with his shadow. She didn't need him to define her worth. But life has a strange way of circling back to the places we've tried to avoid. One afternoon, Lila burst into the kitchen, eyes shining. "Mom, you won't believe this. I've been invited to speak at the Melbourne Global Business Gala. They want me to share my story about sustainable entrepreneurship. I was proud beyond words, but when she handed me the invitation, my heart nearly stopped. At the top of the glossy card, embossed in silver, were the words, "Hosted by Cross Enterprises." I didn't need to see his photo to know Adrian was the man behind the event. At that moment, every wall I had built to keep our past buried began to crack. I told myself he wouldn't notice her, that she was just one of dozens of young entrepreneurs being honored. But deep down, I knew the truth had a way of surfacing, and the thought of those two worlds colliding, our life without him and his empire without us, filled me with a dread I couldn't shake. I didn't tell Lila about the connection. I told myself it was to protect her, but part of me was also protecting myself. I wasn't ready to face Adrian Cross again, not after 18 years. Not after he had left me to carry everything alone. But as the gala approached, I couldn't escape the growing fear that he would see her and know. And worse, that she might see something in him she had been missing all her life. The weeks leading up to the gala felt like walking a tightrope over a pit of memories I'd spent years trying to forget. Lila was buzzing with excitement, juggling her school schedule with interviews and preparation for her speech. I did my best to match her enthusiasm, nodding along as she read drafts aloud in the living room. But inside, I was battling a constant thrum of anxiety. Every time she said the words "Cross Enterprises," my stomach clenched. The night before the event, I stood by her bedroom door, watching her rehearse in front of the mirror. She looked so poised, wearing the sleek navy jumpsuit she'd saved up for, her hair swept neatly over one shoulder. It struck me just how grown she had become. She didn't need me to hold her hand anymore, but I wanted to, desperately. I was afraid that tomorrow might change everything. The morning of the gala, Melbourne's winter air was sharp and crisp. The city skyline glittered against a pale sky as we rode the tram toward the venue. Lila scrolled through her phone, occasionally reading out congratulatory messages from friends and mentors. I forced a smile each time, but my heart felt like it was ticking down to something I couldn't stop. When we arrived at the Grand Metropolitan Hall, the sight took my breath away: polished marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and staff in black and gold uniforms guiding guests to their tables. The place radiated wealth and influence, and I could feel Adrian's presence in every corner, even though I hadn't seen him yet. I tried to keep my eyes on Lila as we found her check-in table, but then I caught sight of him across the room. 18 years had passed, but he was still unmistakably taller than most in the crowd, his dark hair now flecked with silver, his tailored suit fitting like it had been made for him, which it probably had. His smile was charming, but it didn't reach his eyes. For a moment, I froze, every muscle locked. He didn't notice me, at least not then. He was greeting dignitaries, shaking hands, posing for photos. But as I turned to walk away, his gaze flicked in our direction and lingered. It was brief, but something in his expression shifted, like a spark of recognition he couldn't quite place. The event began with speeches from major sponsors and industry leaders. I sat toward the back, my hands wrapped tightly around my clutch, my eyes fixed on the stage where Lila waited for her turn. She was glowing under the lights, confident and articulate, her voice carrying clearly across the hall as she spoke about her journey, her mission for sustainable fashion, and the values that guided her work. I saw people nodding, smiling, even jotting down notes. Then, somewhere halfway through her talk, I glanced at Adrian. He was leaning forward in his seat, his gaze locked on her, not with the polite interest of a CEO watching a young entrepreneur, but with something deeper, something that unsettled me. His jaw tightened slightly, and he tilted his head in a way I remembered all too well, the way he used to study something he wanted to understand. After her speech, the applause was thunderous. Lila stepped off the stage, beaming, and I hugged her tightly. "You were incredible," I whispered. She laughed, brushing it off, already being swept into conversations with investors and journalists. That's when Adrian approached. "Emily." His voice was lower than I remembered, but the sound of my name on his lips still hit me like a punch. I turned slowly, my heart pounding. "Adrian." For a moment, we just looked at each other. There was no embrace, No handshake, just an ocean of unspoken history between us. He glanced toward Lila, who was laughing with a small crowd nearby. His words trailed off, but his eyes were searching mine. She's Lila, I said, my voice steady. And she's not here for you. He flinched at that, almost imperceptibly. I didn't know, he said, his voice hoarse. Emily, I swear I didn't. You didn't care to know? I cut in. The years of silence, of struggle, of being left behind, it all sat on my tongue, bitter and heavy. You made your choice a long time ago. Before he could reply, someone from the media pulled him away for a photo. I used the distraction to slip back into the crowd, keeping a careful distance for the rest of the evening. But it didn't end there. I noticed him watching her all night, slipping questions about her into casual conversations with other guests. When she won the Young Innovators Award later that evening, I saw something break open in his expression. Pride, maybe. Regret, definitely. Back home that night, I thought maybe that would be the end of it. That he would keep his distance, as he always had. But the next day, Lila received an email invitation, personal, not corporate, from Adrian Cross himself, asking to meet for lunch to discuss a potential collaboration. She showed me the email, her eyes wide. Mom, this could be huge for my business. Why would the CEO of Cross Enterprises be interested in me? I felt the walls closing in. I could no longer pretend this was a coincidence. My past was no longer content to stay buried. It was clawing its way into our lives, and I had no idea how to protect her without breaking her heart. And somewhere deep inside me, a terrifying thought began to take root. Maybe, despite everything, Adrian wasn't going to walk away this time. The lunch meeting came faster than I'd hoped. I considered telling Lila the truth before it happened, but each time I tried, the words tangled in my throat. How do you tell your daughter that the man she might be about to admire was the same man who once walked away from her before she was even born? We met at an upscale restaurant overlooking the Yarra River. I insisted on coming along under the guise of being her manager, though really, I needed to be there as a shield. The moment we walked in, Adrian stood from his table. He looked more composed than at the gala, but I caught the slight hitch in his breath when he saw Lila up close. Lila, he said warmly, offering his hand. It's an honor to meet you again. She smiled politely, oblivious to the undercurrent between us. Thank you for inviting me, Mr. Cross. Please call me Adrian, he replied, his eyes flicking briefly toward me. Throughout lunch, he kept steering the conversation back to her personal life, her upbringing, her inspirations, her dreams. She answered honestly, telling him about growing up in a small town, about my late nights working to support her, about how she'd built her business from scratch. I could see him absorbing every detail, each answer tightening the knot of realization. Finally, he asked the question I'd been dreading. And your father? Lila shook her head. He wasn't in the picture. Mum raised me on her own. The pause that followed felt like it might split the room in two. His knuckles whitened around his glass. I stared hard at him, silently daring him to say something. But he didn't. Not yet. When the meeting ended, he handed her his card. If you ever need advice or resources, my door is always open. His tone was gentle, but his gaze was locked on me, carrying a message only I could read. A week later came the gala follow-up event, an awards dinner for the winners. I had hoped he wouldn't attend, but of course he was there. This time, his eyes barely left Lila the whole evening. I could feel the tension building, like a storm waiting for its moment. It happened halfway through the dinner, during the CEO's closing remarks. He stood at the podium, thanking the attendees, speaking about the importance of nurturing young talent. Then he paused, his voice catching just slightly. There is one young entrepreneur here tonight whose story moved me more than I can put into words, he said, looking directly at Lila. Her name is Lila Hart, and she is my daughter. The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, camera flashes made it instant chaos. I froze, my pulse thundering in my ears. Lila turned to me, her face pale, confusion flooding her eyes. Mom, what is he talking about? I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. The truth was out now, and I hadn't been the one to give it to her. She pushed back her chair, standing abruptly. We're leaving. Her voice was low but firm. The crowd's murmurs followed us out the door like a tide. Outside, under the cold night sky, she rounded on me. You knew. All this time, you knew, and you didn't tell me? I was trying to protect you, I said, my voice shaking. I didn't want your achievements to be tied to him. I didn't want you to think you needed him. She blinked hard, swallowing her anger. But I had the right to know. Then she turned and walked toward the curb to hail a taxi. In the days that followed, everything changed. The media storm was relentless, articles speculating about nepotism, interviews I refused, offers for joint business ventures that Lila rejected outright. She buried herself in work, but I could see the wound had been cut deep. Adrian called, texted, even sent letters. At first, I ignored them. But then, one evening, Lila handed me her phone. He wants to meet us. Both of us. Just once. No press, no cameras. I'm going, but I want you there. We met at a quiet cafe by the river. Adrian looked older than I'd ever seen him, the sharp edges of his confidence dulled by something softer. I can't undo the past, he began, his voice low. I was a coward, Emily. I thought walking away was the easier path, but it only left me with regret. And Lila, I'm sorry. You deserved a father. Lila didn't say anything at first. She just studied him, her eyes searching for sincerity. Finally, she said, I built my life without you. If you're going to be in it now, it's on my terms. He nodded, emotion flickering across his face. On your terms. Always. Then he turned to me. Emily, I never stopped loving you. I know I don't deserve a second chance, but I want one. I want to be part of your lives. Both of you. The words hung in the air, heavy with possibility. I thought about the years I had spent hating him, the nights I had sworn I'd never forgive. But I also thought about the girl I had raised, the woman she had become, and the chance for her to know her father, not as the man who left, but as the man trying to make amends. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. But for the first time in 18 years, I didn't walk away. That spring, he proposed not in some grand public display, but quietly, on a rainy afternoon in my kitchen, with Lila sitting across the table, grinning in spite of herself. If you'll let me, he said, I'd like to marry you and adopt Lila. Make us a family in name, not just in truth. This time, I didn't hesitate. We still had years of healing ahead. There were trust issues to rebuild, boundaries to respect, and wounds to mend. But for the first time in a long time, it felt like the three of us were walking towards something together. Moral lesson. Life has a way of bringing us back to the moments we thought we had left behind, not to punish us, but to give us the choice to face them with courage. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It's choosing to move forward without letting the past keep its hold on you. People can change, but change takes honesty, humility, and the willingness to earn back trust one step at a time. Whether it's in love, family, or friendship, the most powerful bonds are built when everyone chooses to stay not because they have to, but because they want to. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with the lessons you've learned. Your thoughts might just inspire someone else's healing journey.